The film opens with a father and son named Josh and Dalton. They are getting their memories of a traumatic incident erased. We jump to about 9 years later, where Josh and his wife Renee are divorced, but she brings Dalton, who is obviously grown up, Foster, and the junior sister to the funeral for Josh's mother Lorraine. Shortly after the burial, Renee tells Josh that he ought to drive Dalton to college the following week, even though their relationship has since become strained after the divorce. Josh then notices a man nearby and approaches him. He says his name is Carl, and that he used to know Lorraine, his mother. Josh goes to his car and hesitantly texts Dalton to see if he is cool with the idea of Josh driving him to college. Behind Josh's car, a blurry figure can be seen walking toward him. After Dalton texts Josh yes, he puts his phone away, and the figure seems to disappear. Josh drives Dalton to his liberal arts school. It seems that the father-to-son relationship is not just there. Josh helps Dalton unpack in his room, where Dalton meets his roommate Chris Winslow, though he feels there has been a mix-up due to him believing she would be male because of her name. Dalton puts up his drawings and artwork, which include his siblings and mother, but not Josh. Dalton expresses his resentment of Josh, while he calls his son an ungrateful shit. After Josh leaves, both of them quietly tear up to themselves. Dalton begins his class with Professor Armageddon, who proves to be harsh and critical when she tells one student to tear up his drawing for seeming too simplistic. When the student refuses, Armageddon dismisses him from her class. Per her words, Dalton starts to tear up the drawing he made of Lorraine, even though Armageddon says it is beautiful, but she admires his initiative. She then instructs the rest of the class to dig deep into their memories for their next drawing. This triggers Dalton's memories of the Further, a shadowy dimension between heaven and hell where the most dangerous supernatural demons live, which is related to the past they erased their memory for in the beginning of the movie. Dalton uses charcoal to draw a door before a demon hand pushes against his, causing him to bleed on the door. This also appears to awaken something in Josh. In another scene, Chris tries to make Dalton more comfortable by getting to know each other. Dalton says he has no memory of when he was 10 years old, and that he has been afraid of the dark ever since, prompting him to sleep with a bright night light. Josh goes to the doctor for an MRI scan. While in there, he appears to lose consciousness as the lights go out. Josh starts calling for help until he sees what appears to be a demon in a hospital gown crawling toward him. Josh freaks out until the doctor gets him out and says that he was asleep for 15 minutes and that the scan went well. Later, Dalton hangs out with Chris as they go to a frat party. They sneak into the room of one of the frat boys, Nick the Dick, where Dalton ends up in the Further and encounters the spirit of a young frat pledge that died during a hazing incident. He is vomiting into Nick's toilet and begs Dalton to close the door. Dalton hides under Nick's bed when he comes in. And after Nick leaves, the dead boy reappears and vomits on Dalton before Chris comes to find him. Before Nick comes into the room again, Chris kisses Dalton to make it look like they were just messing around. Nick then makes a crude joke about Chris, leading her to kick him in the balls before she and Dalton flee. At night, Dalton astral projects into the Further after going to sleep. He goes to Chris's new room in the astral plane and uses her keyboard, which wakes her up and alerts her to his presence. Although she sees nothing there, Chris decides to go to Dalton's room, where he tries to explain the visions he has been seeing. Chris later digs into the astral projecting phenomenon and finds a YouTube video of two guys explaining it, along with a video of Elise, who Dalton vaguely remembers. Elise explains that the more you travel into the Further, the riskier it becomes, as the soul of the damned would be able to enter the real world. Josh is in his home trying to do an exercise where he hangs up pictures of his loved ones to try and remember them since his memory is feeling fuzzy. Outside, the same figure that stalked him at the cemetery starts walking closer to the window before it crashes through and attacks Josh. After all the commotion, Josh finds a box labeled Ben Burton. Josh looks into Ben's case, as he was a mental patient who committed suicide. The box also contains pictures of Lorraine, which makes Josh realize Ben is his long-lost father that he never knew and always blamed for why he was so screwed up. A note on the back of one of the pictures says, "This ends with me," indicating that Ben thought killing himself would stop the rest of his family from entering the Further. In another scene, Chris joins Dalton as they sneak back to Nick's room for astral projection, since Dalton wants to find the dead pledge's spirit and communicate with him. While there, a more demonic entity attacks Dalton while he is in the Further, and Chris is also attacked in the real world by a demon. Nick finds her unconscious but manages to revive her. After she is taken to the infirmary, Chris tells Dalton she can no longer help him, and he should not mess with the further, because the next time he might not wake up. Josh goes to Renai's house to speak to her about what he learned about his father. Through their conversation, we learn why they got divorced. Josh, possessed by one of the demons in the further, chased Renai and the kids with a hammer, which is why Dalton drew the event with Josh looking monstrous. Renai also mentions that he and Dalton had the power to travel to the further, and that was why they had to erase their memories. And Ben only killed himself to be able to protect his family and end the curse of the further. Later, Josh calls his junior brother Foster to remind him of the memories that were erased as a child. Foster jugs his trying to kill them with a hammer. After the call, Dalton with a perfect memory finishes the drawings of a possessed Josh holding a hammer. He then texts Chris saying he needs to go back into the further once more to put an end to things. While Renai and Josh were arguing about how they could have resolved their relationship and everything could have worked fine, Foster enters the room to show them a picture that Dalton sent to him. Foster explains that Dalton has been having visions about the red door and the man in the picture. Josh knows that Dalton is in trouble and decides to go to the further to find Dalton. In another scene, Dalton is also in the further, reliving the traumatic memory of Josh trying to attack the family. Meanwhile, one of the demons is possessing Dalton's body in the real world. Chris comes into the room to try to resolve things with Dalton. She notices something unusual about Dalton, as he pushes her into a traumatic incident of her childhood in the further. Chris wakes up and sees that Dalton wants to attempt to strangle her. Dalton immediately falls down due to activities going on in the further. Josh and Dalton manage to find each other in the further. Josh rescues Dalton from the demon that possessed him and both try to run from none other than Lipstick Face. Dalton is able to get out, but Josh stays behind to hold the red door to prevent the spirits from entering into the real world, thinking it's up to him to end the terror. He ends up at the red door that Dalton drew, while Lipstick Face is trying to break through. In his room, Dalton paints over the door, which causes it to disappear and traps Lipstick Face behind it. Josh then sees a vision of Ben, his father, smiling at him, and Josh appears to finally forgive him for leaving him. Josh wakes up to find Renai and Foster relieved that he is okay. Dalton and Chris also stay with each other when everything is over as they share a smile. Later on, Josh and Renai appear to be in the process of reconciling, so he may potentially move back in with her. Before he leaves, he sees a vision of Elise talking to him, saying that he and Dalton have bright futures ahead of them. Josh goes back to Dalton's room, where he finds that Dalton has added a painting of the time Josh carried him out of the further. The two then share a long-awaited hug. The end. Leave a like, subscribe, and comment on your thoughts about this movie. See you next time.